Many of us love a good TV drama series. There's a reason shows like Law & Order and Grey's Anatomy have run so long. I myself love a good drama series on the rare occasion. So when my streaming service suggested I might like Chicago Med, I thought, I'll give it a shot, see if it's any good. And now I'm 5 seasons in and I have questions. Like, how in the name of all that's holy has this show managed to stay on air so long without the American Medical Association lobbying for it to be taken off air? Every other episode is full of the most unethical and illegal behaviour by medical staff. Surely that is hurting the medical profession's reputation. But it does give me a chance to talk about your end-of-life wishes and why your family needs to know about them. Heads up, we post death and dying related content every Friday. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's talk the unethical mess that is Chicago Med. The show. So Chicago Med was created by Dick Wolf as part of the Chicago franchise, which also includes Chicago Fire and Chicago PD. They run the same kind of show as Law & Order, which was another one of Dick Wolf's series. The show began in 2015 and continues to this day. However, it was only briefly shown in 2016 on Channel 9 here in Australia, and I'm watching it on my Aussie Prime account. But even if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you can get the gist of what the show is about. It follows the doctors and nurses in a fictional emergency department of a Chicago hospital. Now, we are under no illusion here. This show is fiction and it's played up for dramatic effect so that people keep coming back to watch it. But much like Law & Order, there are slivers of truth between the theatrics, and the writers of the show have said that they can only use real published medical cases as plot lines. And that is the reason we're talking about these episodes now. Because when I talk about the over-medicalization of death, when I say doctors will push for any life over quality of life, many people get confused. Others get angry, saying you want all the sick people to die, or you're some alternative hippie, etc., etc. So we know nuanced definition is not going to help these people understand, but this show gives examples that are very blunt and in your face that even they can't ignore. Some people need to be hit by a freight train before they're able to catch on to what you're saying, so here comes that freight train. Choices. Choices was the episode title of Season 1, Episode 9. And I tell you that because YouTube won't let me show you, so if you want to watch it, you're going to have to put out a net and find it. Anyways, in this episode, a woman is brought to the emergency department by ambulance having collapsed at a cafe. She is still unconscious, and when her family arrives, her husband tells doctors that she has end-of-stage lymphoma and that she has a do not resuscitate order, and this is on record. Lymphoma being a type of cancer with treatment options including chemo and radiation. But if you are in the end stages, it's going to be a bad time. And there's a link in the description to an article on end of life with lymphoma. But back to the episode. Dr. Holstead, being the holier-than-thou doctor that he is not satisfied with this. No, he thinks some yet unproven medical trial will miraculously save the patient. But before he gets to this, the patient goes into cardiac arrest. As per her DNR, she should not be resuscitated, but our good old doctor does it anyway. He performs CPR, likely breaking her ribs, and intubates her, i.e. putting a tube down her throat because she ain't breathing by herself. The patient survives the cardiac arrest, which would have been her way out of dying a slow, painful death from lymphoma, but what the hell, she's alive, right? The patient and her husband go on to rightfully sue the hospital and press charges against the doctor, who is not suspended or fired because apparently that would make the hospital look like it was admitting guilt, or so the storyline goes. Now, do not resuscitate orders are legally binding, whereas advanced care directives are a grey area, at least here in Australia. Now again, this is fiction and unlikely to happen, but it is a good illustration of some of the points that I've made in other videos. Many doctors feel they know what is best for the patient, regardless of how well informed the patient is. Many take death as a failure of themselves as doctors. And that keeping someone alive as long as possible, no matter if they're actively dying, is better than quality of life. As many medical professionals have pointed out about this particular storyline, if this was real and the doctor did this, they would no doubt be fired and found guilty in civil court. Criminal court is kind of up in the air. But they also admit that they know many doctors who would push hard against the husband saying his wife had a DNR in an attempt to manipulate the situation in their favour. There have also been a handful of court cases in the US over the years for this very offence. Point is, your loved ones need to know what you want and be assertive enough to advocate on your behalf. Lesson learned. This is season 2, episode 18. The same doctor as before is attending to a patient who happens to be his first mentor in the medical field, who he remembers with great fondness and enthusiasm. Well, she's very elderly now, dealing with the start of dementia, and is in hospital with kidney failure and pneumonia. The dementia alone is going to have a significant impact on her quality of life, and is something most people agree they wouldn't want to go through. Everyone in the ER department knows that she's not going to make it due to a kidney failure, but wow, is he going to try? Even though she taught him back in the day, quote, treat the patient, not the disease. He attempts CPR, even if she did come back, she'd be on a ventilator and still in kidney failure. He goes on to have an emergency ethics committee formed to see if, because she has dementia, she probably doesn't know what she wants. Who knows, she may have wanted to be kept alive, he tells himself. Eventually, he works out that keeping her on a ventilator is a bad idea and turns it off, letting her die peacefully. This is a doctor who, and great work from the writers here, said it's not his job to listen to the patients, it's his job to decide what's best for them. Which kind of sums up this character, but also this type of doctor. And again, yes, this is fiction, but I've dealt with those kind of doctors, and I know nurses and patients who have dealt with this kind of doctor. So while I'm in no way suggesting that all doctors are like this, they do exist. And this means you need to know what you want and what you don't want, and how to articulate that before you end up ill or injured. You also need to tell your family. Now, not all families are perfect. Not all families will agree with your wishes. Not all families will have a suitable, assertive, confident member who would be willing to stand up to a doctor to advocate for you. But you need to try. The danger of fictional medical shows. So these are just 2 examples of unethical behaviour on this particular show in relation to death. And I know a bunch of you will be rolling your eyes saying, yeah, but it's just TV, everyone knows it's not real. Really? Remember, and I've said this before so many times and I will continue to repeat it, critical thinking is not in everyone's wheelhouse. Frankly, many people are not that bright. They don't have the ability to think through complex topics, and they just understand things as it's shown to them. I was lucky. At my primary school, critical thinking was drilled into us. Not every school does that. So when you say they are just storylines, what does it matter if a fictional doctor violates a fictional patient's rights? Well, because cultivation theory shows how the media you consume begins to shape how you view the world. With millions of people tuning in each week to watch shows like House, Grey's Anatomy, Chicago Med and the like, it starts to get into people's heads. Watching doctors consistently ignore patients' wishes may deter those who are already wary of doctors. Many people would not want to be seen by a Dr. House who's a bully in a white coat, Dr. Chase who will use his job to kill people, Dr. Stevens who will put your life at jeopardy for the sake of her fiancé, and Dr. Holstead who doesn't care about patients' boundaries. This is where some would expect pleas from screenwriters to go back to the day where AMA reigned over TV, but that would create problems of its own. Medical TV shows that follow procedures to the letter would not be nearly as entertaining as the drama we see on TV today and that we've become accustomed to. But it could be done. There is no need to entirely scrap the plotline of a doctor unknowingly switching out a patient's medication, as long as there are proper consequences and discussion afterwards. This approach allows your TV show to be compelling but also ethically accurate. And I think this is the part that, as a viewer, annoys me the most about this particular show. There is never any resolution to the situations they show. Everything is just left up in the air and never spoken about again. People are always going to watch these kinds of shows, no matter what you say or do. But it is important for viewers to realise that while these storylines do have some truth to them, it is still not reality, and that some things are sensationalised in order to draw you in. So constantly reminding viewers that it is not always accurate would be a good public statement. Of course, this is much easier said than done, because when you're watching a zombie apocalypse show, you know that's not reality. But when you see somebody dying in hospital, that very well could be reality. So it makes it much harder to separate the fact from fiction. If you are young and healthy, but also smart and thinking about writing your advanced care directive and putting other things in place just in case, I do suggest watching this show, no matter how frustrating I find it. Because virtually every episode shows some ethical dilemma for you to consider, and this will help you fill out your directive as you work out what you would want in each of these situations. The problem with advanced care planning is unless you're being diagnosed with something specific, you don't really have an idea about what to write. Now, we will do a video on just this at some point, but for some people, watching these scenarios play out in front of them can be very helpful in working out what you would want in certain situations. As always, after giving this video a like, we would love to hear what you think about all this in the comments below. Now, go talk death.